Hello and welcome to our 2025 broadcast of this special program. Today we are proud to highlight the partnerships and leadership shaping the future of Louisiana, driving innovation, sustainability, and resilience across our communities. And we are honored to have with us an extraordinary panel of leaders today who are making a meaningful impact in their respective fields. First, please welcome Dr. Steve Nelson, Chancellor of LSU Health New Orleans, and talk about a beacon of hope and innovation in healthcare in our region. Plus, we are joined by Beth Branch, who is the president and CEO of the Port of New Orleans. She plays a pivotal role in driving economic growth and connecting Louisiana to the world through one of the nation's most dynamic ports. Next, we're joined by Philip May, who is the president and CEO of Entergy Louisiana, and Deanna Rodriguez, president and CEO of Entergy New Orleans. Together, they are leading Entergy's efforts to deliver reliable, sustainable energy and drive meaningful change for communities across the state. Thank you all so much for being here today. We're going to dive right into an important discussion and explore how each of these remarkable leaders is helping to transform lives and communities across Louisiana. So I'd like to start with opportunity. That's a good place to start this discussion. Each of you can answer this question, and it's really, what do you see as Louisiana's biggest economic opportunities in 2025, and how does your organization play a role in shaping that future? We'll start with you, Dr. Nelson.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, those kind words. Well, the drive for NCI, or National Cancer Institute designation for Louisiana, is our primary view for the future here. As you may know, there's no NCI-designated cancer center in Louisiana. The nearest ones are either to our west in Texas or to our east in Alabama. And so many of our citizens who suffer from the consequences and the ill effects of cancer drive miles, hundreds of miles, to leave the state to find the best cares available. So our drive is to get NCI designation for Louisiana, and LSU Health New Orleans is leading that fight. Now, you might say, well, what does that do for the state? NCI-designated cancer centers provide the best care in terms of cancer care, also in terms of giving people the opportunity to participate in the latest and the greatest clinical trials. So it not only saves lives, which is obviously very important, but it offers opportunities in terms of prevention, state-of-the-art treatment, and gives hope to people who need hope.
Okay, good point. Good point. Beth, what about the Port of New Orleans?
Thanks for that introduction, too. And I loved how you said the port is dynamic, because it really, truly is a dynamic place. And it is part of the heart and soul of the state and how New Orleans was actually formed, shaped, being driven by all things maritime. So from our perspective, we're very, very excited because we think in 2025, we're actually going to put shovels in the ground to launch our new almost $2 billion container terminal downriver from where we are today, about 17 miles south of where we are today in St. Bernard Parish. That is going to be a phenomenal driver for economic development in the state. We're partnering very, very closely with LED and others, regional and local economic development organizations, to make sure that we deliver for the state. Just to give, it's always a sort of a surprising number, but about 1 in 5 jobs in the state of Louisiana today are connected to maritime-related business. So that's about 525,000 jobs, not all direct jobs, obviously, but also indirect jobs, people who are involved in trucking, warehousing, et cetera. So it's a huge driver, and the development of this new container terminal downriver will continue to drive cargo and drive global supply chains, but it will also add about 18,000 jobs to the state of Louisiana. About 4,300 of those are going to be in St. Bernard Parish. So we're very, very excited about the economic impact of that and the importance of doing that, because without moving downriver, we'll cease, quite frankly, to be a container terminal because of the air draft restrictions on the Crescent City. So it's really an imperative, and we're really excited about delivering it. So shovels in the ground in 2025.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you said 525,000 indirect. That's amazing.
That's the big number.
I don't think people realize how many.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yes. Philip, what about Entergy Louisiana?
Yeah, so right now, Entergy Louisiana is focusing on opportunities for state. Louisiana probably has the biggest opportunity set in terms of economic development projects that we've ever seen. It is an incredible generational opportunity in which is set to change and transform the economic outcomes of this state for generations to come. There's really 4 areas that we're seeing in this, and the first one is one we've heard a lot about lately, and that is AI. So we're seeing data centers coming to Louisiana. You may have heard about Meta locating to Richland Parish, a $10 billion, one of the largest, most advanced data center in the world is locating in Richland Parish, Louisiana, which is amazing. But we also have another slate of opportunities. With the change in the administration, we're going to see the pause on LNG go away, so we expect LNG to pick up again. That's a massive opportunity for the state of Louisiana. Louisiana is the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the entire world, and we expect to see more of that come. And then the next 2 are the traditional energy stuff we've seen before, petrochemical, refining, and those kinds of things. Those have been a driver for our economy for many years because of low energy prices and deep water ports, skilled workforce. We're seeing that as a very important and growing segment of the economy as well. And then a rising piece of this is energy transition. So what we're talking about there are producing products that have lower carbon. For instance, producing ammonia or hydrogen that is either blue, meaning most of the carbon has been removed, or green, in which all of the carbon has been removed. Sustainable aviation fuel and things like green diesel are all part of that opportunity. Interestingly, that energy transition piece is the largest component of that. The largest set of investments are coming from the energy, and that's the first time ever that segment of our economy has an opportunity set like that.
Okay. And Deanna, what about Entergy New Orleans and the role that it's playing in shaping the future?
The opportunities for Entergy New Orleans are sitting right next to me, actually. And probably one other piece of it would be our hospitality and entertainment and restaurants and the thriving growth that we're seeing in that with Super Bowl around the corner. But it is through innovation in the healthcare industry. Two of our largest customers for Entergy New Orleans are in healthcare. And it is through the VA hospital, LSU, Tulane, Ochsner, LCMC. It's every part of what you just described in how we can impose and impact this new growth in our city. So that whole corridor is an opportunity that's just waiting for us to include in infrastructure and invest in infrastructure so that we can draw and create the dreams that you're saying you're after. We can enforce and help with that getting here. And then with the port is an opportunity for Entergy New Orleans in terms of electrification and what we do, what we're seeing with even the shore power. What we'd like to do on shore power is electrify some of the ships that come through New Orleans so that it is a little bit cleaner and we can have these cruise ships dock and plug in. So that's an opportunity for growth for Entergy New Orleans. And then clearly what I look at in the rest of the state is the growth that AI is drawing, just the attention that Louisiana is now drawn to itself and what we're able to attract and bring to New Orleans. So I see that success is contagious and it is good. So we're wanting everyone else to see that success and recognize Louisiana, and in particular Entergy New Orleans, and what we can provide in resilience to the city.
Okay, and I'm glad you said Super Bowl because I do want to go there next. A lot of excitement building leading up to the big game, and we know that powering major events is such a big deal here. So with Super Bowl less than 2 weeks away in New Orleans, how is Entergy, I should say, preparing to ensure reliable and sustainable energy for such a high-profile event?
We learned the hard way on what we should do, and we prepared immediately after what everyone will surely talk about what happened in 2013. But that is something that we have been tested over and over again. So we can talk about the Super Bowl. We probably should also talk about Taylor Swift, who was here for 3 days in a row. And those kinds of preparations, that was a dry run, if you will, in terms of the volume, and that was 3 days in a row. So we're confident that we've done everything we could and can do all in advance. We have worked with the city, we've worked with the state, we've worked with the Superdome, we've worked with ASM Global, we've worked with everyone. We got the smartest minds in the room to make sure that we're prepared. And it's not just the Super Bowl, it is the entire city that will be jam-packed. So we're excited to welcome the world to our front porch and make sure that everything is ready, and we know it is.
Okay, very good. And
Wait, I should pass it on to Philip because he's the engineer of us.
oh goodness, go ahead, Philip.
So he can.
Not much to add with the Super Bowl, but when you have an opportunity like that, that really is, the city is in the spotlight. And that's why we attract those important events, whether it's Taylor Swift for 3 days, Mardi Gras, Super Bowl, those kinds of things. It has an enormous economic impact, but it showcases the city. And I think as we think about major events, we also need to know that we need a more resilient grid, because when we have a storm, Louisiana is in the spotlight. And how we respond and ability to get the grid back up more quickly, that is all positive for economic development. That is part of a story, how we're resilient and able to respond, and business can de-risk even in this part of the state. So it's all about making sure that people have the perception of what Louisiana is and what New Orleans is, a great place to do business.
When you think about what everybody is saying, it's really all about big ideas and big opportunity, whether it's the port, AI, and how those things advance us. Same as NCI. These are big ideas. I always say, I've been here now for 40 years. Louisiana used to have big ideas. Built the Superdome, built the Causeway, had big ideas, and now it seems the time is right to have big ideas again. AI will transform everything as relates to medicine, everything from diagnosis. You can diagnose skin lesions and cancer better with AI than you can with a dermatologist. Same thing, you can predict outcomes in terms of cancer therapy. Everybody talks about precision therapy. In other words, not everybody responds the same to different pharmaceutical interventions. AI is a way of predicting that this person will respond best to this and this one to that. And when you think about the port, I think about it a little bit broader, not just in terms of container ships, but in terms of medical tourism. We used to be a destination place for people from South America, Central America to come here for the best of care. They now go to other places like Miami and things like that. But there's no reason that if we can't develop the biodistrict, which is what you referred to earlier in terms of all the healthcare facilities there, that we can't once again be a medical destination for medical tourism. So all of these things interact. And it's all about moving forward and building on big ideas, I think.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit more about tourism. Beth, can you tell us the impact of the cruise line industry and how tourism plays a role in Louisiana?
Sure. So pretty exciting. We just had last year in 2024 our largest movement, is how we count it, movement of passengers through New Orleans, about 1.3 million passengers. I will have to tell you that after COVID, I did not think that the cruise industry would ever come back. I thought it was gone. And it was for a couple of years, but it has really made a quite a resilient rebound to the tune of not just at levels of passengers prior to COVID, but far succeeding that now. In the last week, sitting over at the port, I will tell you that I have toured MSC Cruise Line's brand new launched luxury line. It made its inaugural call here. And followed that up about 3 days later. I can't divulge the name of the cruise line, but another cruise company who is bringing on a couple of other ships into their fleet, and they are looking at New Orleans as their home port. So that is in the last week. So it's pretty exciting. About 90% of the passengers who come to New Orleans are from out of state. About 70% of those stay for a day or two in New Orleans. And so while we're really happy about the cruise part of that, we're also really happy for the city because it's about $125 million in revenue, about 300,000 hotel rooms a night. All powered by energy, and if anyone has an emergency, they know where to go. So that's kind of the connection between all of us. But it's really a growing. It's quite, and like I said, I was quite surprised at the growth trajectory for cruise, and I think it's going to continue to be really exciting for the city. Also, because it's one of the few places in the world that you can get off of a cruise ship and actually be where you want to be.
Absolutely.
And a lot of places, as you know, don't have that. You get on a shuttle and then you go somewhere that's probably a fake setup, something or other for all the cruise passengers getting off the cruise ship. And here you get right off into our magnificent city, and you're where you came to be. So that's quite extraordinary.
All right. Thank you, Beth. And Dr. Nelson, talk about the role that healthcare plays in economic growth for Louisiana and job creation.
Sure. Well, let me just say one more thing in terms of that comment. So there's no reason when those people can't come on those ships that they stay for a week or two and get their medical intervention. Lots of people go to, out of state. They go to places like Spain and other countries for their cost because it's lower. That's why they go to their care. But if you have state-of-the-art care, those people will come here. The most common procedures they come for are cancer care, plastic surgery, and things like that. So the idea is, why not come to New Orleans, come on a nice cruise ship, spend 2 to 3 weeks here, and then get your medical thing dealt with, and then move on back home. In terms of our economic sort of impact, so for big LSU, it's about $6.5 billion, 45,000 jobs. For LSU Health itself in New Orleans, it's about $1.6 to $1.8 billion and about 9,000 jobs. When you talk about NCI itself, let me talk about another state. In this case, it was Kansas, where the state and different philanthropy invested $200 million to get NCI designation for Kansas, the only one in their state. That economic impact was over $3 billion within about 5 years, created over 45,000 jobs. So again, this drive for NCI will really have a dramatic impact in terms of our state, not only saving lives, but driving the economic growth of the state. And then if the biodistrict really develops as the way we all hope it does, that now it's got some funding, that will be the sort of the lighthouse where all of this will occur. Lighthouse, thinking about the ships again. And that, it will spur growth. Biotech companies will come in, and it will really ignite a whole new era for healthcare in Louisiana.
I love the way you're tying it all together. You all are doing an amazing job of doing that. So let's go to the next question, talking about workforce impact. Again, how is your organization addressing workforce development to meet the demands of a changing economy? And I want to hear from everyone. Let's start with you, Philip.
Yeah, so look, one of the things I want to touch on is when Meta came to Louisiana, one of the things they were keenly interested in is workforce. Now, there's 500 permanent jobs associated with that. Is it a part of the state that really hasn't seen much in the way of economic opportunities? The good news is that about 2/3 of those 500 jobs are things that are high school graduate plus certification. So we are, and Meta is already working with the local community and technical college system to put in place the basic certifications so that our local citizens are the one to get that job. So when you look at Louisiana, we have lots of opportunities for people right out of high school. The challenge we have is if you go out of high school, you can make a decent living doing different things in trade and so forth, craft type work. The challenge you have is ultimately you run a plateau and you're not able to advance. Through certification, this is a real focus for the state. Through certifications and additional training, you can add to those skill sets and add to your income over time. And so that's going to be a big focus of the state. That's a big focus for us, is making sure we can enable those kinds of programs so that our citizens can get those certifications. Many of these can be achieved in weeks instead of years and allow them to advance their career. So in terms of workforce development, whether it's linemen or whether it's a chemical engineer, Louisiana has all those ingredients of making sure that our citizens are focused on those things that can enhance their career and their quality of life.
Okay. Deanna, how is Entergy New Orleans addressing workforce development?
We do it in a couple of ways. Very similarly, we partner with Delgado Community College for a lineman school. So if there is a young man or woman who wants to maybe not go to college or goes to college and say, I really rather not be in an office setting, they can make a very, very good living either with Entergy New Orleans, Entergy Louisiana, or any utility. And these are, in the way we look at it, as their first responders. So this is an exciting opportunity for people that love being outside and working hard and then keeping the lights on. We invite them to do that. So we do that. We partner for jobs. We also, Entergy Louisiana and Entergy New Orleans, we're 2 of 5 operating companies across our footprint. Our headquarters, our parent company is Entergy Corporation. Just Entergy Corporation, it employs about 2,000 people throughout the New Orleans metro area. That alone has about a $59 million annual impact. And when you talk about the only Fortune 500 company to be headquartered in the state, this is important for us. The only way to bring other Fortune 500 companies to headquarter, maybe we'll get Facebook, maybe we'll get someone else, is by having at least one here. So these are the kinds of economic impacts, workforce development, opportunities that we look. So we do it through partnering with schools, partnering with universities, and then encouraging other people to stay in New Orleans and come and work for us.
Dr. Nelson, what about LSU Health Center? How are you addressing workforce development for a changing economy?
So the likelihood is that when you go see your doctor or your dentist in Louisiana, if you look at their wall, their diploma probably came from LSU Health. So 70% of the physicians in this state trained in an LSU facility. 75% of the dentists trained at LSU. We have the only dental school in the state. And so we really like to say provide the healthcare workforce for the state of Louisiana, because we're not only a medical school and a dental school, but we also provide nurses, public health. We have 6 schools. So we really provide the healthcare workforce for the state. The issue is, how do we maintain that in terms of continue our growth and make sure that we meet the needs of the state? So we have many, many programs that reaches out to the local schools across the state to bring different children into our school from K to 12 and programs in college as well, to show them the opportunities there exist in healthcare. You don't necessarily have to be a physician. You can be a respiratory therapist, a nurse practitioner, PA. So there's lots of opportunities. And so we really are the healthcare workforce for the state when it gets right down to it.
Okay, and Beth, what about the port? We've talked about the hundreds of thousands of direct jobs.
That's right. And it's a daunting number, to be honest with you. I have spent some time in neighboring states, and I can tell you that with every economic development win, there is fear in everyone who is down the road. Because there's a lot of poaching that goes on, and that is not workforce development, that is workforce movement, and that's definitely not anything that we want to be doing in Louisiana as economic development really takes off and continues to grow here. So some of the things that the port is doing, we clearly need to make sure that our terminal can be built, that there are warehouse drivers, workers, that there are folks who know how to operate certain types of equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So we are partnering with a workforce group with the city. We're heading up let me get the name right, the Maritime Transportation and Logistics sector. We bring together employers to make sure that we understand what the needs are, and then we close that loop and that circle by making sure that Delgado and Nunez and other Urban League, et cetera, are connected to what those needs are so that we can do the training and make sure that we have the skilled workforce in place. The other things that we are doing is we've recently been awarded a $1 million grant from the EPA. We are partnering with local organizations because there is a workforce development component of that. That stuff is really important to us because to be able to build the ecosystem and the infrastructure that delivers the economic development, if you don't have the workforce behind it, you won't have the economic development. So really critical for us, and we have a really vested role in making sure that that's successful.
Okay. And next question goes for Entergy, so you can both answer this question. But how does Entergy collaborate with businesses and organizations to maximize the economic impact of major events?
Well, you may have predicted I was going to say Meta at least a few times
Yes.
during this. Look, I think what you saw with Meta is really quintessentially a partnership. And so this thing started in there. If you haven't seen the article, there was a great article in the times-picayune recently about the backstory of that. This started with what we saw as an opportunity to potentially bring a $10 billion investment to part of the state that hadn't seen anything like this. But that conversation started with a then acting head of the LED, Ann Villa. Once that conversation started, we then met with the governor, who then put in motion all of the things we needed to do. Our partnership with the local elected officials and so forth, our partnership with legislators, our bringing this to the Public Service Commission so we can get those things approved. We have partnerships with the regional economic development organization. So you probably see Michael Heck. He's on the TV a whole lot right now because of his work that's going on the Super Bowl. But that partnership allows us to be very effective on drawing these businesses in and being successful in attracting them. And I just want to say that win of Meta in Richland Parish changes the narrative of this state. You talked about big ideas earlier. This is the biggest of ideas. And I think it's important for people who live in Louisiana or from Louisiana understand that this is a tremendous win. It's not a surprising win because we in Louisiana know what we're capable of, and it's just we need to let people outside understand, and we do that through that partnership. Meta came here because of the outstanding partnership we had. Entergy, our local regional economic development organizations, those local officials, the governor on down. It took a team to win, and that's how we did it.
Deanna?
Our partnership in New Orleans runs through either residential customers, we're informing them. So our partnership is through all our customers, and through our hotels and hospitality industry. So what we've done is worked with them more one-on-one in trying to figure out, okay, now we have a customer service opportunity to meet the needs of the hotels in that industry, making sure they're ready for big events. So that is an opportunity for us to grow. The other piece of it is, however, is that we look with our city regulators, because it takes everyone talking about economic development in a way that is positive and not a bad thing to talk about. Because when we talk about affordability, Louisiana in general and New Orleans in particular, we have some of the lowest rates, utility rates in the entire country. And the best thing to do for the community, though, is to create jobs. The only way to create jobs is to invite investment. So it's that virtuous cycle of an opportunity investing. The other piece that we've done is investing in resilience, because we know that our customers, including LSU, they want to attract researchers. They want to attract customers and their researchers and other customers want to know that we will have our electricity on. And as we've invested in resilience, we just got several million approved in Louisiana. And then for us too, for Entergy New Orleans, investing in infrastructure not only provides jobs, but it also provides the peace of mind as we invite other companies to come into New Orleans, and they can count on the utility staying open.
All right, Dr. Nelson, what cutting edge advancements can you tell us about as far as LCMC Cancer Center goes that's really helping position Louisiana as a leader in healthcare?
Well, there are many different forefronts where we really excel in terms of our research enterprise. Our yearly sort of grants from the federal government, somewhere around $45 to $50 million. Some of the areas that we excel in is in immunotherapy. So one of the greatest advances in cancer care in general is sort of turning the immune system on so it recognizes that the cancer cell is indeed a foreign cell and a foreign invader. And what happens in the immune system is that the cancer cell sort of tricks the immune system into thinking that it's not a foreigner. And now there's different medications and drugs and therapies to sort of turn that immune system back on to recognize that it as, in fact, a foreign invader needs to be removed. And we excel and have many, many experts in that field. That's probably one of the most exciting opportunities in terms of the future is really immunotherapy in cancer. But getting back in terms of the things that we talked about earlier, in terms of Warren Buffett once said something that always has struck with me. Somebody is sitting in the shade today because somebody else planted a tree many years ago. Mm-hmm. And again, when you think about the different things we're talking about here, whether it's the port, whether it's investment in AI, it's really laying the foundation for incredible growth for this state. AI is going to totally transfer the way medicine is practiced. I always like to think, so I'm an ICU doctor, intensive care doctor by trade, and people sometimes ask me, well, what do you think about the ICU and all the technology involved? But when you think about it, sometimes technology actually separates you from the patient, right? Because you're separated from the patient by the machines and everything. Many doctors are separated from their patients because they're dealing with all these administrative tasks and things like that. AI is going to totally transfer that. I call it sort of digital enablement, and will allow the physician to actually spend more time with the patient. So rather than being a barrier to the patient, it's actually going to enhance that interaction. And so it's going to transform the way we do almost everything in cancer care as well. One of the problems with cancer care is that how do I know this drug is going to work in this person for this diagnosis? And everybody is unique. And so you don't know that. You have certain markers and whatnot. AI is capable of looking at the genetic makeup, looking at tens of thousands of different data points and saying, and that person with that cancer, this is going to be the most effective therapy. And that's some of the other areas that we're leaders in as well. Be able to predict who will respond to what therapy, and whether or not also on the other side, who's at risk to develop these diseases, because the best way to treat cancer is to prevent it. AI can also look at huge amounts of data and say that this person, given this profile, is highly at risk to develop this disease, and then you screen those patients so that they, you catch the disease earlier or they don't get it, because again, the most effective way to treat disease is to prevent disease.
Such good insight. Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson. Beth, how does the work that the port does impact the state of Louisiana? I know you talked about the container terminal a little while ago, but let's talk about, in addition to water freight, the importance of train and truck freight. And are there any new developments there for 2025?
Sure. So in 2018, the port bought from the city, took over from the city, the New Orleans Public Belt Railroad. So that is what we call a short line railroad. Think of it just as a sort of a regional rail line, not one of the large national rail lines. But the really critical piece of importance for that asset to the port and to the state is that it connects, unlike any other port in the United States, it connects our goods to every single national railroad. So we can go east, we can go north, and we can go west. No other port can do that. If you're on the West Coast, you can go east. If you're on the East Coast, you can go west. If you're in the Gulf, you might be able to go north. But to be able to go east, west, and north, it's really a competitive advantage that we have. Now, the important thing with LIT is to make sure that we keep all that rail connectivity in play, and that we're hitting and being able to connect our port not just to Louisiana, but the rest of the country. Whether that's feedstock coming in, whether that's finished goods going out. I think there's going to be some medicine somewhere in there, or medical equipment, et cetera. But it's really important that we have that rail connectivity. Same thing with trucks. Today, New Orleans is primarily what we call a truck-away market. We've got a population of X, and we're served mostly by truck. So getting that rail piece of it is really critical. I always say there's going to be three things that really lead to the success of any port complex. The first one, and that's the job of the port, is we have to make sure that we have the capacity. So we have to build the infrastructure. The second thing we have to have is the warehousing and distribution, because if you think about every box coming off of a ship, if it sits in our container yard, we can't put another box there, right? So it blocks movement. And so we need those warehousing and distribution to keep cargo flowing and the velocity and fluidity in the supply chain. The third thing, and the really important part of this, is the rail, because we are not a domestic consumption market that supports millions and millions and millions of containers. We have however many people we have in the state. We're not a Houston, we're not an LA, we're not a New York, we're not, Chicago, even though that's inland, is still considered a port. And so we really have to be able to bring feedstock in or send it out, and also move finished goods in and out. So The truck is important, the rail is important, and the warehousing and distribution, I just had to put that in there, that's also really critical. So all of those things are going to start to come together in 2025, which is just a really critical year for us in terms of breaking ground and starting to move forward with this complex downriver.
Okay. Let's talk sustainability. Philip, what clean energy initiatives is Entergy advancing that align with Louisiana's long-term economic goals?
Yeah, so we have a number of different things. So today you can choose an option that's called Go Green, in which you can select zero carbon energy. So you can offset if you have a process that produces carbon, or if you just want clean energy, you can have an option, a tariff to do that. We have Go Zero that provides an option, another option for customers as well around zero carbon energy. We currently have gone through a 3 gigawatt docket, which give you a feel for a gigawatt. Entergy New Orleans is about a gigawatt. So solar energy for a 3 gigawatt docket. With the Meta transaction, they are also interested in another 1,500 megawatts, 1.5 gigawatts. So we're doing 4.5 gigawatts of solar to make some of these available to our customers. We talked about one of the largest, most attractive economic development pipelines that I've ever seen, probably the biggest in the state's history. Nearly every one of those projects have a sustainability component. And so what that means is if you want to be able to attract the jobs, the development, and what that really means is better quality of life for our citizens, you have to have that sustainability component. We're doing that through clean energy. We have nuclear power, which provides about a quarter of our energy, and that is zero carbon. We have the ability to provide it through solar with batteries, and we're also looking at wind, including at some point we'll have new nuclear, which is zero, and offshore wind, which would be zero carbon as well. The importance of that sustainability is to ensure that we can provide our customers what they demand. This is not a policy driven by the current or the prior administration. It's driven by our customers' desire for cleaner products.
And Beth, back to you, the cleaner energy initiatives for the Port of New Orleans, what does that look like?
It's really critical for us. As Philip mentioned, you can imagine we have all these different vessels coming in. And I will tell you, they haven't landed on what a standardized fuel is going to look like. You all probably know that very, very well. We've talked about hydrogen, green, and blue. We've got, LNG is still out there. We still have traditional bunker fuels, et cetera. But the port's really got to be prepared with whatever that looks like to be able to handle the vessels coming in. But from a greening standpoint, one of the exciting things for us is that we're building the only greenfield container terminal that's been built in this country in decades and decades. I will tell you, when I sat in the seat for the first time about 7 weeks ago and I saw the renderings of what this container terminal is going to look like, it's pretty darn exciting just from what's going to happen with the equipment, a lot of electrification. You guys are really critical for us in the success of that container terminal. But, you have the opportunity, because you are building the infrastructure in the ground, you have the opportunity to do all sorts of things like shore powering and vaults. It's very, very expensive and very, very inconvenient to take an old terminal and say, and now I think I'm going to green it, right? Because you're ripping up things, you're stopping operations, et cetera, et cetera. This is just a really exciting opportunity to be able to do that. So we're really looking forward.
And look, if I can add, we do have shore power. I know you're working on that as well. The great thing about this is our customers are telling us the thing that they like about shore power, of course, is the sustainability element and so forth. But in the communities where they're doing business, they're able to turn off those diesel engines. In other words, there's less of the smog associated with it, cleaner air and so forth. And their O&M costs go down because they can provide a cheaper, better product to keep the ships and so forth the way they need them to without having to run those diesel engines, incurring fuel costs and maintenance costs.
Okay. Dr. Nelson, we talked about big ideas in healthcare, innovation in cancer research. Let's talk about access. How are you improving access to cancer care for underserved communities in Louisiana? Because we do have a lot of them.
Well, as you know, the primary mission of LSU and the charity hospital system was exactly that, to provide the best of care for everybody who came through our doors, and specifically make sure that we cover the underserved. And so when you think about Louisiana, in some ways there is the haves and the have-nots, especially if you think of urban-rural and the big rural divide. A large part of Louisiana is, in fact, rural, 90%, depending on how you define it. And so how do we make sure that we reach those patients? So not only those who live within New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Alexandria or the cities, Shreveport, are able to have access to research and clinical trials and new therapies. So we actually have two of the most innovative programs in the country looking at that. One is the virtual nurse program. And one of the limitations, and say if a doctor is in Bunkie, Louisiana, to enroll somebody in a trial, say in breast cancer, is they don't have the expertise or the manpower to do that. So we do that remotely by using what we call virtual nurses. This has been so successful. This was developed by Dr. Ochoa at the Cancer Center that now the federal government is using this across the country. And so that's going to make a big difference. In addition, there's these trials that are really focused on getting the community involved and treating you at your site, where does you happen to live, called NCORE. We're the number one sort of enroller in NCORE across the whole United States. And again, Dr. Ochoa received a national recognition for this years ago. So a large part of what we do actually is in terms of making sure people in the rural community, the underserved, wherever they happen to be, have access to clinical trials and the latest and the best in cancer care.
Okay, very good. All right. Our last question is going to be for everyone to answer. And I'll start with Deanna. And it's really about collaboration, bringing it all back to working together, because we've talked a lot about that. So how can Louisiana industries, energy, healthcare, tourism, collaborate to create lasting economic and community benefits?
I think the answer is simple, is you take the examples of this conversation here and you row in the same direction. And so that everybody both informs themselves and then acts on it. So I expect and hope and want these conversations to continue. And we hope that our elected officials and the leadership that they're doing now, we can use the Richland Parish as a perfect example of everyone having the big idea, seeking it out, and then bringing it to fruition, because it takes everyone wanting to get the same things done. So I encourage these kinds of discussions. It's given me all kinds of ideas, even sitting here today, of how do we take this around the city? How do we talk about how we're all working towards the same goal, and that's to improve New Orleans.
Philip?
And I'll sort of expand on that a little bit for Louisiana. So, we talked a bit about the success of Meta. It was really about partnerships. I will tell you, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. All of us want what's better for our communities, for our children. It's about a better quality of life. And so we have deep alignment around what we're trying to achieve. We may see different ways, but when we had the opportunity, which was Meta, it proved the point that Louisiana can work together to have those outcomes. And so when it really is about making sure we are focused on the outcomes we want and then creating pathways to make that happen through collaboration.
Yes, thank you. Beth?
Gosh, yeah, I think can't add a lot more to what has already been said, and I think you beautifully threaded the needle earlier when you talked about energizing medical tourism. So it kind of all pulled that together. But I think it is, to your point, Philip, it's all about thriving and thriving communities. And even though we may be sitting on this podium here with seemingly very disparate areas of focus, whether it's utilities and energy and healthcare and medicine and transportation and global supply chains, it actually is all of us coming together to make sure that those communities can thrive and that our state thrives. So you need the utility to power the supply chains that provide the medical equipment to make sure that we have thriving, healthy communities. And like I said, I think when you look at the three kind of sectors on a piece of paper and say connect the dots, one might scratch their head a little bit, but it's very, very connected, one to each other and all to one another. So
You've all done a beautiful job of connecting the dots. Dr. Nelson, your final thoughts.
So I always say cancer doesn't really care if you're wearing purple or gold or blue or green. It affects everybody regardless of where you are. And it's really about all of us working together. I always say my competition, I shouldn't say this publicly, it's not Tulane or it's not Oxnard. My competition is MD Anderson and UAB. And so working all together, bringing all those different entities together is the way that we're going to succeed. And I think this has proved a very helpful forum to show indeed how we can all work together. And by bringing different people together with different backgrounds, actually, to me, is what enriches the conversation. Because again, unless we sort of share what everybody else is doing, you wouldn't think of some of these other ideas. So it's really about, as you said earlier, rowing in the same direction and making sure that we cross the finish line together.
And I love that you talked about planting trees and planting seeds, because even though we're talking about 2025, we're also looking way into the future and making that foundation that you spoke about so beautifully. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Our panel members have given us really great insight into the economic outlook for Louisiana and really the metro area as well. It's been a pleasure highlighting the partnerships that are really paving the way for progress. So again, thank you so much. I'm Kim Holden. Have a great day.